So this is the Aster block that we're demoing today, but it's so simple. We have done so many of these blocks already where we've talked about different ways to applique, and we've kind of covered that ad nauseum. So today's demo is really about setting blocks on point, but we're going to real quick go over this block just so we can check it off our list. All right. So it's real simple. We've got templates on the back of the pattern for the quilt or for this block. 8 petal templates. You can do something fun in the middle, just a basket and stems, and it's all appliqued on. So we've covered all this many, many times. I will say one thing about the flowers. I am not a fan of working with templates. I think it's something of a little bit of a lost art. You know, it's a little bit more old-fashioned way of doing things using templates. Kudos to those who do it and do it well, especially our grandmothers that hand-pieced everything with templates. I don't know how they did it, because I had a little bit of a wobble in 1 or 2 of these and had to resew a couple lines. You know, you have to be so precise. So if I were going to do these again and wanted to save time, Patsy would agree, paper piecing would be the way to go. You know, maybe doing something like a pinwheel and just cutting it down to a circle once you're done. The middle doesn't really matter. I mean, with the templates that we're using today, you know, we've got a middle that you're supposed to applique, just a circle over. But, you know, if you do a pinwheel block, who's going to know, because you're going to put something on top of it. But this was a really nice place to use something to embellish. You can use a yo-yo if you don't want to use just a piece of fabric that you needle turn or raw edge on. I made these cute little flowers. I took about 2 or 3 minutes to make these. I found it online. The lady I found it was using a hot glue gun to glue everything together. We don't do that. But it's just all these little folded circles of fabric, and just on my machine, 1 stitch in the middle, move along, put another folded piece of fabric, 1 stitch. So I'll pass this around so you guys can get an idea of those. And I just used a button in the center to kind of give it a little bit of a bling. To do the flower in the center, you need 9 circles, just depending on what size you want to make. For these, it was about a 2-inch circle. So they do recommend that you use a fabric that is kind of pretty on both sides. A batik works really well because you're going to see the raw edges and you're going to see both sides. And then you need a piece for the center to stabilize all the rest of the pieces. That's about half the size of your other circle, so 2 inches and 1 inch. And she used felt. I had this strip of material. It's kind of suede-y feeling. I bought that for a yard or 2 of that. I was making a puppy dog block and I wanted it to feel like a dog. So it's a little bit stiffer. It's about 2 or 3 times as thick as just a regular piece of cotton fabric. So that made a nice stabilizer. So to make that flower, you just take one of your circles, you fold it in half, pinch the middle, and just fold it in half again. So it's just a quarter circle, and it's a little ruffled on the edge. And so then you put that on top of your stabilizer circle, and I just put 1 back stitch in the very center. And then you just and you just keep adding them on. So you've got 8 of them on, and then the last one, you can finish it however you want, but try and give it a little pretty ruffle. I made the half circle, and then instead of just folding it in half, I made a little bit of a zigzag, just to kind of give it an extra little ruffle on top. So you just kind of like put a little pleat in it, and then finish it off in the middle with a button or something to kind of tie everything together.
How big is that circle when you start?
This is about 2 inches.
Okay.
I just used I found a spool of thread that was about 2 inches. And it doesn't have to be exact. All it has to do is be big enough to cover the center of your flower. Now also I will say about these flowers, using the template, you cut a bunch of petals, all right? So there's 8 petals on each of those. However, these flowers look oversized because I did not take away the 1/4-inch seam allowance yet. So obviously for the center, I don't have to worry about taking that away because it's going to be covered with our other little decorative flower. But each one of these, you could trim down to fit on the block so they're not overlapping if you don't like that look. So especially if you're not doing raw edge, you're going to lose a 1/4 inch when you do needle turn anyway. But if you're doing raw edge applique, I leave the extra so I can put it on the stabilizer or the fusible, and then you can trim it down with a nice, a nice circle so it's all even in the way you like it. The stems on this one are not, you don't even have to do bias stems. I just used a straight, they're not really curved and they're so short. So I just took a 3/4 inch piece of green fabric and tucked the 2 ends over, ironed it, put a single stitch down the center, and it was done. And then of course the basket, I just found something in my stash that looked a little bit like a woven basket. So, and really, I was so not motivated to make this block. I went into my bin of fat quarters and I pulled out the first 5 that didn't clash too bad and just let her rip. So are there any questions about the block?
I got one about the handout. Is there a reason why this measurement of 7.5 inches is there?
I believe that's if you're going to put it on a computer and size it.
Oh.
So if it's going to be a 12.5 unfinished background block, because obviously the templates are on the back side of the handout, and those are to size. But if you were going to size it up or down,
Okay.
that's the scale.
Okay.
So,
All right, thank you.
okay, now setting stuff on point. Now, the cool thing about setting things on point, I have the way I'm going to talk about today is a no waste method. So it used to be, before I knew this cool little measurement trick, you know, you would make stuff, it would all be jagged and hanging off the side. You would have to whack it off and trim it down. And you wasted so much fabric that way. So there's a method where you can make all your setting and corner triangles just exactly the right size to go on, and you're not going to have to waste any fabric. But the other cool thing about setting things on point, I'm going to pass around these two. The pictures aren't the greatest. My printer is being kind of fussy, so there are some spots that are, some lines in it that didn't come out great. But if you're working with panels, or just doing a project that you don't have a pattern for and you're kind of winging it, which I'm real good at getting myself in trouble with that, setting stuff on point is a great way to use up extra space and have it still look kind of fancy. So when you set stuff on point, you can do it obviously like on this quilt, where you can see that it comes right to a point. Everything is nice and tight. All your points are matching up to other points. But the other thing you can do is you can just kind of have the center of your block floating. It's a good way to use up extra space if you have something that's a little off size or you need it to match other blocks in your quilt. And this is really easy because we started off with a center square that was fussy cut, and then I just cut oversized triangles to go. It's a lot like if you're making the quilts where you make the signature blocks. You know, it's a very similar method. I just went one triangle at the top, one triangle at the bottom, and then you flip it and do the same thing on the sides. And you can see, you have a lot of extra flappy there. Well, so if you're going to put it in a quilt, you can just trim that off so you don't have any thicker edges. But it's a really easy way of kind of getting a nice square block on point and using up some extra blank space if you need to shoehorn something into that quilt just to fit with everything else. So, and that's kind of on that quilt going around that's got the bare face. A lot of those blocks on the sides, those are floating. Those are all different sizes. And then the other one that's going around that has the panel in the middle, that's one that the points are more matching the sides, and it wasn't such a squeeze to get it in there. But it's real versatile. You can do a lot of things with it. So we're going to look at the math. On the other sheet that you have that is not the picture with there's the picture with the flower and the pattern. But then you have another sheet that has some formulas and things on it. Now, let's do the math on a 12-inch finished block. It's easier than you think. All right, so you always start with the finished size of your block, not the unfinished size. So if you want to figure out what the setting triangle is going to be, which is this triangle here, the ones on the sides, you take 12 inches for the finished block and you multiply it by 1.41. All right, that gives us 16.92. And then you add 1.25 inches for seam allowances. So when you add 1.25 inches, you get 18.17, which is a real odd size. So we're just going to round that up to the nearest easily divisible 1/4 inch. So we round 18.17 it to 18.25, which is 18.25 inches. So to make that setting triangle, we make one real big 18.25 inch block, and we're going to cut that I hope you can see the lines. They're not super dark. But this is the block that you cut on both diagonals to get 4 pieces. So you get 4 setting triangles out of that block with no waste. Matches exactly to the block you're working with. Now to do the same thing for the cornerstones, or the corner blocks, these here, we do a similar thing. We still use 1.41, which seems to be the magic number, but now we're dividing by 1.41. So we have a 12-inch finished size. We divide that by 1.41, and it gives us 8.51. To that 8.51, we're going to add 7/8 of an inch. Now, 7/8 of an inch, if you convert that from inches to decimal points so you can use a calculator, that's going to be 0.875 in decimals. And so you can find that out pretty easy because you just divide 7 by 8 and use the remainder. So we have 8.51, and we add our 7/8 seam allowance, which is 0.88, which comes out to 9.39. Now we want to round that up to the nearest 1/8 of an inch. Well, I did the math on 3/8 of an inch, which happens to be 0.375. So that ends up 9 3/8 of an inch, because 3/875 is pretty close to, 0.39. So now this is the one that we take our smaller square, and this one we're only going to cut in half along this line, and that gives us 2 corner triangles. Again, no waste, matches right up to your block.
Ask them if everybody knows how to sew the blocks together.
Well, we're going to look at that too.
Oh, okay.
Coming right up, girl.
All right.
And is that, those numbers, the 1.41, and all those things, for any size or just 12-inch?
It's for any size block. Now, if you spin that over, you'll see that there's a handy-dandy chart on the back of the first page.
Oh.
All right, so that has a lot of things already worked out for you. But the reason I wanted to show you the math on a 12-inch block is because you can see, if you look where it says 12-inch block, it'll tell you the setting corner triangle size. That's where they got that 18 1/4.
Gotcha.
And then for the corner size, you can see now where they got their
Right.
9 3/8 inch.
Okay.
All right. Now, the block I worked with today is an 11-inch finished block, 10 1/2 inch, 11-inch unfinished, 10 1/2 inch finished block. Well, there's no 10 1/2 inches on this chart. What do I do now? Now we know how to use the formula. It is one of the handouts that went out today.
Where?
It's on the back of this one. Oh,
It is on the front of that sheet. It actually,
that?
yes.
It's on there somewhere?
It is in the paragraph. It is not written out as a mathematic formula,
Okay.
but it does tell you how to multiply and divide by
Oh, it's down at
1.41.
the bottom.
yeah, formula, down at the bottom.
It's in there.
Okay.
It's like the spaghetti sauce. It's in there. Someone's got to read it. I actually did the setting on point tutorial a few years ago, and that's where this table runner came from. So these are the fabrics I had left over to work with. So I'm going to take this down, but this is essentially what I was going for when I started this tutorial. So you can see our corner blocks, our setting blocks, and all these in the middle are the same size. We're going to get rid of that so I have some space to work with. For full disclosure, I will admit that these blocks are not all squared up to exactly the same size. So we're going to have to use our imagination just a tiny bit, because some of them are a 1/4 inch smaller than the other ones. Like I said, a lot of these were used as mock-ups, and then they've sat around for like 4 years since I've touched them again. So obviously there are a couple of different ways to offset your blocks. That's why I have these different quilts up here. This one, pretty simple. There's just just a little runner in between each block. All these blocks, thank you, sashing, that's drawing the blank. So, all these blocks are the same size. They go together fine. I don't need any blanks in between to stretch it out. But something like this basket quilt, you have the sewn pieced block, and then she has the blank piece to kind of give you a checkerboard thing. So all these blocks are actually the same sized finished block. So that's what we're doing with this demo. I have a few pieced blocks, and then the rest of them are just blanks to kind of fill it out. When you're working with putting stuff on point, the easiest way to think about it is just like if you were adding sashing or cornerstones to any other quilt, except you want to kind of turn it on its side a little bit. So the way it starts is you do everything in rows. So for this quilt, if we weren't looking at it as set on point, we would think about it as the rows just running diagonally. So your first row in the quilt is going to be your first cornerstone. So there's your cornerstone. Now you've got this next row just has one block, but we need to fill it out, so we need two setting triangles. That would be the one we cut from the big 18-inch. So your setting triangles go here and here, and now you have row 1, row 2. And then we go down to row 3, and obviously we have 2 piece squares, and we have our one in the middle that's just kind of a space holder. And on this one, we're also going to need our setting triangles. And you can kind of, without that one falling apart, you can kind of see how it's taking shape.
Wouldn't you need a corner one on there, Jamie, instead of a setting triangle, corner on the end? Where
No,
you're-
because this is going to be the top left corner of our quilt. So we're still going across, like if we had another row yet. Right? We
But
still
you're
have,
setting
we still have another row.
Your setting triangle at the
That's not
bottom
a corner.
needs to be
She's gonna
turned.
make a
Oh, thank you. That's what happens when you go from the back.
That's usually what
All right. Now,
Oh, okay, yeah. All
Right.
right, if you're going
That's
on
what-
with it.
I was going,
I'm running out of pens. And I'm running out of space.
Now we understand. Yeah,
Okay.
yes, you do. We were ending it, you're going on.
Yeah. Well, if I wanted to end it though, you're exactly right. Say I just wanted these blocks. Then we would take, there would be, then that would be a corner block, and our setting triangle would go here. And this is our setting corner. And we would do the same thing down here to finish it. Let's see, this would be,
That goes this way.
here. Andrea's right, that needs to be in the center. And then you would have the other corner being right there.
There you go, it's all ready to go.
Yeah. And if you were just doing another little table runner, those are all your pieces. So, and the way I would assemble this is I would work in rows diagonally. I would work row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and then this would be the fifth and last row. Everybody got me so far?
Yeah.
Any questions?
And to get your center on your blocks, you fold them in two. See, Mark?
Well, yes, but if you're working in rows, this
That's
is
what I mean. Like when I'm gonna put that setting triangle on top of that one, when I'm sewing that together, I'll make the center of the setting triangle in the center of the block. And then I can match those centers so that it comes out equal.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a good backup. That's a good method. But honestly, these come out
It should.
exactly the same size.
Oh, yeah, they
So-
should, but
But right, but if you wanted to,
I live next door to Marilyn.
The Princess of
I
Blue.
get blamed for everything.
The hypotenuse of that triangle is 12 inches, 12 and a half?
I have not, well, it would have to be to match, well,
Because from our view, it looks big, looks too long. That's just,
there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this end is, so when you sew these together, you would start from the corners.
Yeah.
These two
Okay.
corners. And you would leave the tail
all right.
off at the end.
All right.
Because that's gonna get sewn
Okay.
in, lopped off, sewn into your binding.
That makes sense to me,
Yeah.
okay. You're right, okay.
Anybody else have any tips about on point they wanna share that I think is great?
This is a great tool.
Yeah. The chart's very good.
All right, thanks for your patience.
You did this for another time?